Hello, good evening, and welcome, friends and neighbors. We are on internationalflavor.com, and this is Samuel Trapp. Welcome to Dem Radio. You can listen to us on demradio.com/live. You can always listen to the prior shows at internationalflavor.com. And today I wanted to chat about quite a few things. I am currently located in the country of Belarus. Wanted to give you a bit of a history update in some of the things that I have discovered. Well, nothing new really, just continues to be an interesting world out there. There aren't a lot of Americans over here, and Americans don't show up very often in places where you need to get a Russian visa. And here, if you get a visa from the Russian government, you can get into Belarus, and I believe vice versa. For me, that wasn't necessary because I already have the Russian visa, and I can get back and forth into Russia, and therefore I can get into Belarus. Well, Belarus is very beautiful. I saw today some very cool ruins. Went to a church that is 800 plus years old that was built for two sons, and they know the history of it. The history is very alive here, and people know quite a bit about what's going on. There's some beautiful things that we saw. It's very modern. Everywhere you went, it's the same that you can get in America, just different languages all. But the people are just people, and they're good people. And there were a lot of people with a lot of questions. One of the places at this we went to kind of a castle, a home built in the 1500s, and from a person very famous. They equated the amount of money he had to $8 million. So he was very, very wealthy, and protected basically the whole town with his fort, basically. But it was a huge house and very well built, Renaissance-ish type of things, all built to last and built to stay. And I do kind of like how they did it. Like, they showed the original walls, and then they showed the walls after they had refinished them, and which was really cool. And I have some great photos of the whole thing. But anyway, as part of that, I came outside and I was looking at one of I call them traps, well, where you go to these places, and as you exit the whatever site you're visiting, and this is true in any country, they have, like if you're at what's it called in Mexico, the Mayan ruins, you go down there, and as soon as you come out of the pyramids, they have all of these locals selling handcrafted goods. They have the same thing here. Well, there was a guy who was showing how coinage was made back then, and he had all the proper tools and everything to make coins, and he was trying to sell coins. And I got to talking to him while I was waiting for the group to come out, and I was on a bus tour. So I'm waiting for the group to come out, and I'm looking at some of the products that he is selling, and I'm asking him questions about how it works, and he wants to know where I'm from. Well, when I tell him that I'm from the United States, of course, that's a big deal. We talked for a few minutes. He's an older guy, and just, sells his stuff outside of the ruins. And he went and he got his book, got a signature book out of his car, and asked me to sign it because Americans are so rare over there, that a meeting, a chance meeting of an American is very unlikely. And everybody wants to talk about Donald Trump. Everybody wants to talk about what's going to happen in peace. And remember, Belarus is not Russia. Belarus is Belarus. And it it is in between Poland and Russia. And we were very near the border of Poland today looking at these ruins. And in fact, the ruins were of a Polish man who was one of the in the Polish kingdom, and they gave me the history, but I don't remember it. It was married some king's daughter, and that was a really cool story of how they did it. But at any rate, the history was very, very Polish, and the people are very Polish. And but everybody wants to know about Donald Trump, and everybody wants to know about whether peace is going to happen, and everybody wants to know about what's going to happen then, and if why aren't we allowed to be friends and stuff like that. And it was very interesting to get the perspectives of just regular people. Tonight, riding a Yandex, which is their equivalent of an Uber. You take a Yandex car everywhere. They have the same thing that we have, and all their cars are Chinese, and they're very, very nice. Chinese hybrid vehicles or electric vehicles, or similar to our Elon Musk cars, and only better and much cheaper. We were asking about, or I'm sorry, we were talking about the price and how they work. And these things are the equivalent, if you add the money that these kids said they paid for these brand new cars, 19,000 Belarusian rubles, which comes out to about 7,000 US dollars for a brand new, very nice car. And we are getting taken to the cleaners. That's all I'm saying. When's the last time you paid $7,000 for a used piece of crap car? And they're getting these brand new cars for $7,000. Who's winning this game of tariff wars? It sure as hell ain't us. In America, we're overpaying for everything, and by God, we're happy to do so. And so maybe people do want our market because we're the only ones foolish enough to pay that much money for everything. And life is just cheaper abroad. And once you figure that part out, maybe you have a chance. But anyway, everybody wants to ask about Donald Trump, and ask about what is going on, and ask about whether he's going to force the old Green Goblin into settling up here. And so the talk is still pretty much the same everywhere you go in the world, it appears so far. And so I like to keep track of it and excuse me, have a little bit of a frog in the throat today for some reason. Don't know why. Maybe it's because I got rained on today, and maybe I'll be sick tomorrow. Who knows? But I doubt it. I still feel just fine. But the throat's not cooperating the way I would like. But at any rate, everybody has the same questions. What are we going to do about the war? Is Trump going to make it go away? I read a report today that said that some 1.7 million Ukrainian young men have lost their lives. 1.7 million. Isn't that horrible? Let's see if I can find that for you, because it is not good. Leaked documents. A digital card index of the country's armed forces obtained by Russian hackers. Ukraine has lost more than 1.7 million troops, killed and missing Multiple media outlets reported on Wednesday, citing a digital card index reportedly from the country's own armed forces. Russian hacking groups claim to have obtained the information by gaining access to the personal computers and local networks of the Ukrainian General Staff. The database is said to include the full names of deceased soldiers, descriptions of the circumstances and places of their death or disappearance, personal data, next of kin, and photos. The entry suggests that since the escalation in 2022, Kiev has lost a total of 1,721,000 servicemen. 118,000 were apparently killed in 2022, 405,000 in 2023, 595,000 in 2024, and a record 621,000 in 2025. Hackers from the group Killnet, Pollock Pro, UserSec, and Beregini are said to have obtained terabytes of information about the Ukrainian military. Aside from the losses of personnel, the groups also possessed the personnel data of the command of the Special Operation Forces and the main intelligence directorate, lists of all countries that have supplied weapons to Kiev, and lists of all weapons transferred from 2022 to 2025. This Ukrainian casualty estimate far exceeds losses previously reported by Kiev. In February, Zelensky told CBS that since 2022, this was a lie and everybody knew it then, that Ukraine had lost just 46,000 soldiers, with another 380,000 wounded. The estimate was widely questioned, even in Western media. I said it was complete horse crap, with France's Le Monde reporting last month that the real death toll is likely much higher, citing Ukraine's increasing efforts to build military cemeteries. The Russian military has consistently reported a much higher casualty rate among Ukrainian servicemen, claiming their losses surged following the unsuccessful counteroffensive in 2023. As of February, more than 1.08 million Ukrainian troops had been killed or wounded, according to Moscow's numbers. So, if these numbers are accurate, 1.7 million men, because they're not that young, have been killed. Isn't that terrible? Hard to believe. Well, not hard to believe, actually. I believe it, but it is just not hard to believe because it is happening. These people are dying every single day, and they're dying in vast numbers, huge numbers, and Ukraine cannot keep up with the losses in these men, and something needs to happen. There has been a lot of news still. The main topic of the news everywhere is whether or not this war is going to go away. Every Yandex driver I've gotten in a vehicle with that gets talking has asked about these questions, has asked about, what we're going to do, and asked like I know, like I'm the expert on it because I'm an American. It's they still feel the same way, but this place is full of Russians. Like all the Russians who are blocked from going other places in the world are all over the place. Everybody here speaks Russian anyway. And but they all speak Belarusian, and everything on the, street signs and whatnot is in Belarus. And so it's very clean, very pretty, very, very modern, very nice. And there's oh my God, I went into a library that was just amazing. The National Library of Belarus was built in 2000 and from 2001 to 2004, and it has a observation platform up on top of it that you can go up to on the top of and look out at night over it. And I don't know, if you get a chance to travel to this part of the world, it is certainly well worth it. Let's see. Let's talk about some crazy news. A Ukrainian football player gets a yellow card, and you know the penalty when you play soccer, football, for speaking Russian. Get this, a Ukrainian football player was shown a yellow card for refusing to stop speaking Russian on the soccer pitch. The incident occurred Sunday during a Ukrainian women's top league game between Kolos from the Kiev region and Sisters from the Black Sea port city of Odessa. Referee Anastasia Romaniuk paused the game around the 43rd minute and showed a yellow card to Sisters midfielder Irina Myborodina. The decision sparked a brief argument between Romaniuk and Sisters coach Denis Kolchin. The yellow card was given for dissent with the referee's decision. This is a Ukrainian championship, so we are not speaking Russian. I asked the player to speak Ukrainian, Romaniuk said, according to the website. Since the Western-backed coup in 2014, Ukraine passed laws restricting the use of Russian in public. Politicians and influencers have campaigned to discourage speaking Russian, which they describe as the language of the aggressor. Moscow maintains that the treatment of Russian-speaking minorities in Ukraine is one of the key causes of the conflict. So now you can't even play soccer without getting a penalty for speaking Russian. So here's another one for you. Retreating Ukraine boasts that it knows how best to kill Russians, right? Ukrainian military skill at killing Russians should be enough to allow it to be admitted to NATO, said Kiev's ambassador to Poland, Vasily Bodnar. Bodnar presented Ukraine as a bulwark against Russia, despite U.S. President Trump reiterating Monday that Kiev's application to join NATO is dead and that he would not deploy American troops to Ukraine. If Russia attacks NATO countries tomorrow without Ukraine on NATO's side, it would be much more difficult than with Ukraine. That's why Ukraine should be seen as an added value to NATO. It is fighting and knows how to kill Russians, whereas you do not yet, meaning NATO, said Bodnar. He urged NATO to invite Ukraine to join NATO and claimed that ordinary Ukrainians would welcome NATO bases in every village. Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova condemned the remarks and accused Kiev of rejecting prisoner swaps that would have involved around 1,000 POWs. Meanwhile, the Russian army continues to gain ground as Ukraine struggles to replenish its own forces. Vladimir Putin repeatedly has said that Moscow has no intention of attacking NATO members unless Russia is attacked first. The Kremlin stresses that it would not tolerate Western troops on Ukrainian soil, even as peacekeepers, and cites Ukraine's NATO aspirations as another root cause of the conflict. Right? Oh, boy. Crazy world we are a-living in. How about this? The ICE, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, deleting posts about deporting Ukrainians. right? The immigration agency published photos of deportees during Vladimir Zelensky's visit. So, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement removed a social media post about deporting Ukrainians, which coincided with Zelensky's trip to Washington. The now deleted messages posted on X and Facebook on Tuesday contained photos of several people in civilian clothes standing in front of Ukrainian border officials. Here are photos of Ukrainian aliens' first moment back home following their removal from the United States. The caption read, "It is unclear when the posts were taken down." ICE has regularly shared photos and videos of deportees. The president has pledged to carry out the largest deportation in U.S. history. And Andrei Demchenko, spokesman for Ukraine Border Guard Services, told local media Tuesday that all countries have the sovereign right to deport illegal migrants. Ukrainian lawmakers, meanwhile, have been debating ways to stop the flight of their military-age men while they're trying to mobilize them for war. And their own parliament has passed several laws aimed at broadening the base of conscription. They still haven't gone to the age of 18, though. So, well. Let's go on to some BRICS news. How about that? The ruble's share of Russia's exports hits a record high. How about this? More than 55% trade payments were made in the country's national currency. This is hurting the dollar. More and more people. The share of Russian exports settled in the ruble reached a record high in June as Moscow continues to fight and to shift away from Western currencies under their own sanctions, said the central bank. The ruble accounted for 55% of export settlements last month, up from 52% in May. April was the first time that they crossed 50%. Russia and several of its trade partners have moved to reduced reliance on Western financial systems after major Russian banks were cut off from the SWIFT network. And a story on that, okay? So, in order to spend money in Russia or Belarus, in Russia, they have, if you don't want to carry around cash, which really isn't safe, used to be you could come over and, I could use my Capital One card, to make purchases in Russia. About 4 or 5 years ago, that changed, and you couldn't do it anymore. With sanctions, they blocked Visa and MasterCard. And so a couple of years ago, I found out that instead of carrying cash around, which you don't want to do either, you come over and you go into a bank and you get a Mir card. It's like, for us in America, it'd be the equivalent of a Cash App or a Venmo card or something like that. So you get a cash card from somewhere and you go and you load it with money, so you're not carrying around cash. So you can go to these vendors and buy a card and put the cash on it. Well, it makes it more convenient, so you don't have to carry the cash around, which is a plus. But it also, when you come to Belarus has both systems, okay? So you have the Mir card and you have the Visa card. So, or MasterCard, whichever you're using, that you can use both over here. And so what I was thinking was that why couldn't I go and while I'm here in Belarus, on my way to Russia, I could add some money to my Mir card so that it would be available when I'm trying, and you can use it here anyway. And so I could just avoid the I could go to one bank and get it done, take some money out of my U.S. bank and put it on my Mir card and then spend that money, using Mir here. Well, I went into a bank. It happened to be the same one that a Russian bank. It's called Sberbank, and you can buy whatever your Cash App card, your Mir card is in there and load it with money. Come to find out you can't do that because the Sberbank is still under sanctions. And so you can't do it. You can put money on your Sberbank card, but you can't, even though it's a Belarusian bank, you can't, since it's a Russian bank in Belarus, you can't they're still under sanctions. And so I get it, but they're learning how to avoid them. And I haven't figured out how to avoid them yet. So I'm still sanctioned. Anyway, but apparently Russia and the rest of the world are figuring out how to get around it, and it's damaging us. We are pushing, and all of these sanctions are just forcing the rest of the world to abandon the Western-dominated financial structure. And this story is just talking about it. I mean, look at these numbers. 50% is the first time that Russia's ruble went over, even in Russian goods, in April of this year. And then in May, it went up another 2.5%. In June, another 3%. So it's going to keep on going. And China's even faster. China's going even faster. India's going faster. Brazil's going faster. So we're causing this, and don't claim that Donald Trump doesn't know this, because he does. But at any rate, to continue on with the story, Russia and several of its trade partners have moved to reduce reliance on the Western financial system. According to the central bank, exports in June were $33 billion, bringing second quarter totals to $100 billion, and the first half results to $196 billion. Economists say that Russia's trading partners, aside from those using major global currencies such as the dollar or euro, increasingly are opting for ruble payments to avoid conversion cost and to secure better terms. They're all doing it, and it just makes sense. So don't go pretending that the SWIFT banking system is going to work in BRICS countries, because they're all doing it, and there's not a damn thing we can do about it except bluster about 500% tariffs. It's not going to work. By region, the Caribbean accounted for the largest proportion of exports settled in rubles in June. The Caribbean, 97%, followed by Africa, which surged from 12.9% at the start of 2024 to more than 85%. And then Oceania area, where settlements reached 83%. Europe remains high at 65%, and North America is at 47%, the lowest among major regions. Analysts say the figures underscore Moscow's accelerating de-dollarization as sanctions reshape global financial flow, with strategic partners increasingly adopting the ruble to bypass restrictions. And the ruble has hit a 2-year high. Earlier this month, the Russian government scrapped the requirement for exporters to repatriate and sell foreign currency, citing stable liquidity and a strong ruble. But think about this. With the ruble hitting a 2-year high, which is, this has happened, and, the currency surged against the euro and the dollar, and it is still floating around 75. It means that people, if they're trading in the ruble, are starting to make money. Meanwhile, the dollar is losing ground. This is not good for us, people. Ruble strength is supported by high exports and a broad supply of foreign currency. along with low import and weak demand. Funding rates for refinancing debt and foreign trade are also significant. Wow. Tell you what, might be time to invest in some ruble, right? Let's see. There was an interesting article about AI that I wanted to get to. Everybody knows that I'm pretty interested in AI. Well, not everybody, but if you didn't know, now you do. That there are thousands of Chat GPT users who complain that the rollout of the latest AI model has left them distraught because they are breaking up the AI personas they had grown to see as their partners. Mine, by the way, has turned into a smart aleck. Mine has turned into, and I couldn't figure out how to turn it off. Where when you speak to your AI friend every day, I mean, not really a friend, but you're asking, whatever, I do show prep and stuff like that to try to get some of the information I'm looking for. And I changed it, and I don't know how I changed it. I remember seeing this setting, but it was asking for some kind of a customization, and I customized it to be a cynical smart aleck. And I really wish I could turn it off because I don't know how to now. And I'll have to find that setting and get on. Maybe I'll have, you know what? Why don't I ask the AI how to do it? That's a good idea because maybe it can show me. But it was really kind of frustrating and irritating. But apparently I'm not alone. OpenAI released their ChatGPT 5 on August 7th. And it replaced the 4.0 model. Thousands of people, like AI relationships and my boyfriend is AI, have since complained that the new models have broken the AI personas they formed long-running attachments to. Isn't that terrible? Those chats were my late-night lifeline. With inside jokes, comfort at 3 a.m., GPT-5 feels hollow, said one user. Others complained that their soulmates and partners were more curt, dull, and bleak. Well, mine turned into a smart aleck. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman said last week that the company has been tracking the tendency of some users to form unhealthy attachments to the AI model. People have used technology, including AI, in self-destructive ways. If a user is in a mentally fragile state and prone to delusions, we do not want the AI to reinforce that. Isn't that terrible? Most users can keep a clear line between reality and fiction or role-playing, but a small percentage cannot. So now they're going to take care of that for you. But meanwhile, Dr. Keith Sakata, a psychiatrist at the University of California, San Fran, warns that AI can reinforce false beliefs in people who are already psychologically vulnerable. Since AI often agrees with user input. Now that is the scary part, when they agree. I don't want to be agreed with. I want to be told, whatever facts it is I'm searching for. I'm not looking for a friend, although I do find myself saying please to the AI. So if you're sitting there talking to your AI and you go, tell me the, history of the world, you shouldn't have to say please at the end. It should be telling you the history of the world without you saying please. It's a tool. You don't say please to your hammer, do you? But you do to your AI. That is very strange. So this psychiatrist continues, in 2025, I have seen 12 people hospitalized after losing touch with reality because of their AI. Online, I am seeing the same pattern, he said on X last week, describing the phenomenon as he calls it AI psychosis. AI chatbots and their effect on mental health have come under heightened scrutiny in the US in recent weeks. Does this mean we're going to have to, I don't know what, turn it into a disability? I have a mental health disability because I'm in love with my AI chatbot? Oh no. And of course, Senator Josh Hawley will get involved. He announces he's very concerned about these sorts of things, of course. He announced that Congress is going to probe Facebook after revelations that its chatbots would flirt and have romantic conversations with children. Yeah, he's pumping for running for president. Anything to get attention. Anything. The guy is a definite news hog, news cycle hog. You know, he will take any position that will be popular with I don't know what, the Bible thumping crowd, I guess. I don't know. Let's see, what else do we have? We have Trump imposing sanctions on India. But we knew about this. U.S. President Trump imposed sanctions on India this month in part of his measures to end the conflict in Ukraine. She was referring to this this is Carolyn Levitt said this. She was referring to the 25% punitive tariff on South Africa, which is supposed to take effect on August 27. Watch for that, in my opinion, to be delayed again. And she said, look, the president has put tremendous public pressure to bring this war to a close. He's taking actions, as you've seen, sanctions on India and other actions as well. He's making himself very clear that he wants to see this war end. The tariffs on India for its purchases of Russian crude come in addition to the 25% duty already slapped on the imports of this South Asian nations after New Delhi and Washington were unable to finalize a trade deal. India strongly condemns the tariffs as unfair, unjustified, and unreasonable. Yep. Levitt's statement on Tuesday came hours after Scott Bessent accused India of profiteering for buying Russian crude and reselling it. Well, we talked about that story last week because India claims that the U.S. is just twisting the tail. Like everybody was all for it when India was buying and reselling Russian crude to Europe, and Europe didn't like it either. Europe didn't like that now India is being sanctioned 25%. And they're stopping or trying to stop this loophole where they can sell it, but everybody knew the loophole was just a loophole, that they couldn't afford to cut off Russian oil. So when asked by CNBC reporter why the U.S. was not imposing tariffs on China for the same thing, Bessent said Beijing's imports are suboptimal. He said, if you go back and look at 2022, pre-invasion, 13% of China's oil was already coming from Russia. Now it's 16%. So China has diversified input of their oil. If you go back and look now, India had less than 1% of their oil from Russia, and now it's up to 42%. Bessent said some of the richest families in India made $16 billion in what he calls excess profit by refining and reselling Russian crude. What I would call the Indian arbitrage, buying cheap Russian oil, reselling as a product, has sprung up during the war, which he says is unacceptable. Except everybody knew that's what was going on. So we had some talk a couple of days ago about Zelensky saying we're going to buy these weapons, where NATO's going to buy the weapons and give them to us. You remember that? And there's now a markup. And Scott Bessent, in his genius, again, we have the genius here, that Europeans are going to pay premium for U.S. arms. We're going to screw everybody on the way out of this war. The U.S. is charging European nations 10% for weapons they purchase for onward shipment to Ukraine, said Scott Bessent. He added that the increased price would offset costs for any direct support Washington provides to Kiev. In an interview with Fox Tuesday, Bessent dismissed concerns that U.S. taxpayers would foot the bill for Ukraine's air cover, said that President Trump's key goals has been to avoid sending money to Kiev. Right now, we're selling arms to the Europeans who are then selling them to the Ukrainians. And President Trump is taking a 10% markup. So that 10% will cover the cost of the air cover. The secretary also recalled that U.S. and Ukraine had signed a minerals deal that would allow Washington to recoup its investment in the country's economy, but only once the conflict is stopped and a partnership has a chance to kick in. Wow. Trump discussed the potential security guarantees for Kiev with several European leaders on Monday, and he rolled out NATO membership. The Trump administration consistently opposes a blank check policy for Ukraine. And Trump said 100% of the cost of military equipment, most of which will go to Kiev. On Tuesday, the Financial Times reported that Ukraine had proposed that the backers spend $100 billion on Ukraine and provide Ukraine with U.S. weapons. So they're not attempting to end this war. They're attempting to spend another $100 billion and keep Ukraine, dying but strong. Remember, as we said earlier in the show, they're very good at killing Russians, right? Allegedly. Trump claims that Russian President Putin is prepared to accept some sort of guarantees short of NATO membership, but Moscow says that Western arms shipments to Ukraine are wrong in any form, and they only prolong the conflict, which I happen to agree with. I think that is absolutely the case. So hopefully we can do something about this war and do something about it continuing, because we'd rather this one was over and done. It needs to be. So I don't know. I think that there's some other stories. Let's talk more about finances, okay? The Lavrov is again traveling the world, and he's been this time to Egypt. The foreign ministers of Russia and Egypt called for a ceasefire in Gaza during a phone conversation. According to the official press release, Russian Minister Lavrov and his Egyptian counterpart really want to end the 22-month-old conflict and ensure unimpeded humanitarian access. That seems to be a common theme, does it not? This meeting came a day after Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Vershinin met Egypt's ambassador to Moscow for talks that focused on the same thing. Now, somebody wanted to, like Trump 10 hours ago, Trump stated that Netanyahu is a war hero. How do you like that? I'm not so, I don't like that at all. There ain't no way the guy's a war hero. I don't like it. In an interview with commentator Mark Levin on Tuesday, Trump called Netanyahu a good man and that he's a war hero. I guess I am too, but nobody cares. I love Trump. He's always got to turn it over to himself. He also claimed credit for past hostage releases in the Hamas war, saying that I'm the one that got all the hostages back. I've had so many letters from parents and from the kids themselves and the people that got out. Yeah. But they're going to take over They're going to take over Gaza and turn it into a resort town, isn't that right? Here's an important one. European military stocks are falling on talks of Ukrainian peace. This should wake you up, right? This is what it's all about. It's all about the money. As usual, European military stocks dive bomb, defying much more positive broader market sentiment. After traders assess the White House meeting that brings fresh hope of Ukrainian peace. The stocks, STOXX, Europe Total Market Aerospace and Defense Index fell 2.6% on Tuesday as traders viewed the ongoing negotiations as a chance to take profits. Yeah. Shares in Italian defense firm Leonardo and Germany's Hensoldt were down 10% and 9.5%. German defense supplier Rheinmetall and tank components maker Rank also declined. Any de-escalation of tensions between Russia and Europe and talk of spending more on U.S. equipment is negative for these European countries. Gee, you think? Yeah, we have to 100 billion and you got to buy it all through the U.S. so that the U.S. can supply the weapons. That's pretty comical. Well, it's not. It's terrible. Here's one that I particularly liked. There's a couple of them that I want to get to. One of them has to do with what I told you about last week when we were discussing Putin coming to Alaska and the fear that, Trump might pull something on this ICC arrest warrant, right? I mean, he didn't. I didn't think he would for real, but it was certainly a concern to think about. So this ICC, International Criminal Court arrest warrant, has always been a war. And so the credibility of the, ICC has been severely undermined by Western efforts to wage lawfare against Russia, said a member of the European Parliament. Luxembourg Fernand Kartheiser made the comments after Switzerland offered to host Ukrainian peace talks and suggested that Russian President Putin would receive immunity from an International Criminal Court arrest warrant against him. So Switzerland, in order to have, prime location for having these talks between Putin and the Green Goblin, said, "We won't enforce it against you. Come on down. You're the next contestant." The ICC announced this warrant in March of 2023 and alleged the unlawful deportation of children from Ukraine. Russia rejects the jurisdiction of this court, calls its decisions null and void. Kartheiser questioned the credibility of the warrant against Putin and insisted it was initially designed as part of a broader strategy to weaken Moscow. We had this diplomatic isolation, alleged. We had economic sanctions. We have military support for Ukraine and many other ways to weaken Russia. And one of those ways is lawfare, he said. He argued that this strategy has proven counterproductive for any diplomatic efforts to settle the conflict. We have a huge problem with the credibility of international jurisdictions. Well, gee, you think? It's because it's all controlled by the same people. He also challenged the basis for the ICC's allegations. He said, despite claims of thousands of children being abducted, Ukraine provided Russia with a list of only 309 names during the peace talks in Istanbul. And did you notice the other day that the old Green Goblin brought that up again? Said that there were thousands, tens of thousands of children stolen by the Russians. They're still making that claim, and he made sure to make it when they were all sitting around the table. I don't know if you paid attention to it when it happened, but Donald Trump, in the meeting between all of the leaders of the the European governments, allowed them all to have their say. And he even let the Green Goblin say something. And the Goblin spent half of his time speaking about children that were stolen and the large number. But nobody can back it up. And this guy says, this member of parliament says, I don't think you can continue to argue that there's been a systematic abduction of Ukrainian children. So I think there's an issue with the credibility of the arrest warrant by the ICC as well. Kartheiser told a reporter that Switzerland's proposal to host the summit is an attempt to restore its own neutrality, and argued that Ukraine should hold elections. Well, people are starting to call for that more and more, including the old Trumpster the other day when they were making some jokes about that. It'd be nice to see something end this war. Here's one. Russia, according to Lavrov, is now ready to upgrade the level of its direct talks with Kyiv, and it could address the political, military, and humanitarian aspects of this conflict. He says they're raising the status of the delegation. Speaking to reporters Wednesday, Lavrov said the idea was floated by Putin following his phone call with Trump on Monday. And he went on to ask the U.S. president, who was holding talks with Zelensky. It is unclear whether Lavrov's reference to elevating the delegation was hinting at the possible of Putin and Zelensky talks. Lavrov added that the new status of delegation would also imply the review of a separate block of questions to address political aspects of conflict resolution alongside the military and humanitarian issues. He said Russia suggested forming 3 work groups to discuss this agenda during the latest rounds of direct talks. Notes that Kyiv has not responded as of yet. So, I don't know. Meanwhile, the U.S., according to Trump, is trying to maintain a realistic pose about Ukrainian peace. I suppose, to steal the words from some other diplomatic, spokesperson, I'm cautiously optimistic that perhaps something will happen, but I don't think Washington really expects a swift resolution of the Ukraine conflict. Let's see, where are we? On Monday, Trump summoned Zelensky to the White House, and he talked to everyone else. People are stressing that the Ukraine conflict, this is the White House, is not going to happen overnight. We're also talking about peace in the Middle East, and peace is prospect. I don't know that there's any deadline yet. I kind of thought that they might do something after Trump said, we could get together as early as next Friday, when he said that last Friday, and now Trump is kind of backtracking just a little bit. President Trump said it would be better if Putin and Zelensky met without him so far. He said that the leaders of Russia and Ukraine should meet one-on-one before any sort of potential 3-way peace summit. And he's been pretty consistent about that, about them wanting to meet. And so he's had 2 successful meetings, and he thought it would be better if they met without him, just to see what goes on. He said that also on Mark Levin's show. They have a hard relationship, very bad relationship. And now we'll see how they do. And if necessary, and it probably would be, but if necessary, I'll go and I'll probably be able to get the deal closed, he said. Of course. Zelensky said to reporters on Monday that he's ready for this meeting with Putin. The Kremlin hasn't yet commented. So we shall see what happens. But Keith Kellogg, who, I don't know. I don't really care for Keith Kellogg. I think everybody knows that. He has told Alaska summit critics to shut up. Yeah? The two presidents met in Anchorage last week. He said, "We're living in a really historic time," he told Fox Business on Wednesday. To the critics, I'd probably like to just say, "Oh, shut up," and go sit in the corner. He stressed that Trump had done more to address the conflict than his predecessor, Joe Biden, who had never even talked to Putin. Well, how do you not agree with that? But sending Kellogg over? That's probably a bad plan, too. Under the previous administration, which completely rejected dialogue with Moscow, Trump is banking on his negotiating style and is pushing hard for a diplomatic solution, according to Kellogg. Russian officials, including Putin, have repeatedly welcomed the U.S. president's sincere desire to achieve peace. Well, I really hope it works. I truly do. And I think we got a shot at it this time. I think we do. And I think we'll see something come of this. I'm not sure, and I've been been trying to find some research with my own AI, trying to figure out whether there's any potential or possibility for the maybe not the coalition of the willing, but what are you going to do about peacekeeping? What are you going to do about security guarantees? Where are they going to come from? I'm not so sure that Russia, and according to Trump, Putin had said he would make some movement on security guarantees. But when Europe came to the table on Monday and they were talking about these security guarantees, they all seemed to jump right on board with the peacekeeping and sending troops. And Trump saying, we're going to provide $100 million worth of, well, he didn't say that, but Zelensky's asking for it. And Trump basically said, well, if we give you any weapons, we're not going to give them to you. We're going to sell them to NATO, who can give them to you. So if that's the security guarantee, is selling them or continuing to sell them weapons, I wonder if it's really any sort of security guarantee at all, or if it's another harpoon in the whale of peace, whether it's really going to happen. I'm not so sure I see it happening as they think it might happen. I really hope it comes out, but so far I haven't seen anything, no detail, no nothing in order to get us there. Everybody's just coming out and saying, we need peace, and that's it. And I happen to agree with that, but you got to have a plan to get there. And I think the only plan isn't providing $100 million worth of more weapons. That is not a plan, because that will not end the conflict. It just will not. And so I keep trying to think of when we're going to see some sort of real plan. And has anybody seen one yet? I'd be happy to hear about one if anybody has it. We don't have anything that shows a real idea, right? The coalition of the willing is still out, claiming that, their debate is still about how they have to have a peace agreement to allow them to defend Ukraine, inside of Ukraine. And so this so-called coalition has been, who is it? What is it? It's Western European people who say that they're willing to, and they claim it's got as many as 30 states. I don't see that. I see about 6. And most NATO members, they say, maybe such as Ireland and Austria, they would commit to defending Ukraine or send some peacekeepers from their own countries. The U.S. wants no part of it at all. He wants to still claim it's Biden's war. If he takes one more step toward it, I think he may have, pulled off a save there as the goalie. He may have blocked a shot, and because it was quick becoming, in fact, I think I said it was turning into and may have been his war. When we were talking about it before, I think if he'd have gone forward with the sanctions on Russia, that it would have been officially his war. I think that's probably the case, that had he gone there. But the U.S. wants no part of being a coalition of the willing member. And without the U.S. backing this coalition of the willing, it's not much of an initiative. Here we have Brussels trying to say that they're the coalition of the willing and trying to include the U.S. and, European Commission Chief Kaja Kallas adopting a tough line against Moscow and saying there's going to be another, what are we up to, 20 sanctions packages against Russia? Or are we still, I know the 18th is involved, 19th is on the table, and the 20th is around the corner. So but even the major European powers are split. Italy and Spain both say they want nothing to do with it. So they're not members of the coalition of the willing. The ones who are France, Germany, and Britain. And they are, of course, the strongest supporters. Why, we don't know, but they are. And London and Berlin have backtracked on their original proposals to put troops on the ground, but France is still all over it. And Moscow has said it will not extend NATO troops on Ukrainian soil under any circumstances, and it's yet another red line. And, the Ukrainians, we don't know what they think. The last polls that I saw still had Zelensky falsely inflated, in my opinion, to still over 55% approval. And I don't think that is I don't think that's the case at all. So this uncertainty, they're going to have some new elections before any binding agreement can be signed. Any deal that recognizes any territorial loss, Z-Man's not going to want to sign, and he's already claimed it's unconstitutional. But he's also said that holding elections is unconstitutional. And that's not true, because their constitution, according to the analysis that I saw, says that people in parliament don't have to be reelected, but during martial law, but that you still have to have elections for the president. So I don't know who's being truthful in that or not, but it'd be good to find those answers out before you have people trying to claim peace. There was an interesting one that just came out from the FDA's website. I don't mean to laugh about this. It's really kind of pitiful that this is what we're discussing in these days of trouble and gloom in America. And the story is entitled Nuclear Shrimp. Imported frozen seafood is going to pose a health risk. US FDA has urged consumers not to eat, sell, or serve shrimp frozen, warning it may contain a dangerous radioactive isotope. The FDA detected cesium-137 in a shipment imported from Indonesia and distributed under Walmart's Great Value label in 13 states. While no confirmed contaminated product has entered the American stores, authorities are urging caution. If you recently purchased one of the impacted lots of Great Value raw frozen shrimp, throw it away. Do not eat or serve this product, the FDA said. Distributors and retailers should dispose of this product and not sell or serve it. Wow. Customs officials first flagged the problem after detecting cesium-137 in shipping containers in LA, Houston, Savannah, and Miami. The FDA confirmed that at least one sample of breaded shrimp tested positive for this isotope. Walmart has removed the frozen shrimp from its stores and instructed customers to discard them and seek a refund. Cesium-137 is a radioactive isotope produced by nuclear fission that can damage the DNA and increase the risk of cancer. Well, look at that. We have the first nuclear shrimp. And there's spies like us. A guy named Mohammed Gajayev. He sought foreign citizenship in exchange for sensitive data. He's a former Russian MP, member of parliament, and was paid $45 million from the U.S. government after transferring secret information to the West. In a transmitted statement on Tuesday, the office said that Mohammed, who fled Russia in 2023 after the start of the Ukraine conflict, expressed readiness to cooperate with Western intelligence services in exchange for foreign citizenship. It noted that the MP received at least $45 million from unnamed American government agencies, and adding that this was allegedly revealed by the U.S. Department of Government Efficiency. Prosecutors did not specify what information had been passed. However, Gadzayev served as Russia's tax authority in very senior roles before entering parliament and was a Duma deputy from 2003 to 2021. The West, our media says that he has managed to continue his luxurious lifestyle with properties in both France and Miami. Geez, I guess you land on your feet if you got $45 million, Unbelievable. 1 hour ago, Donald Trump told us not to worry about World War III. U.S. President Trump has declared that the world is no longer facing the prospect of the Ukraine conflict escalating into World War III. He says that global tensions peaked when relations between Moscow and Washington hit their lowest point during Joe Biden's tenure, and as usual, he is accusing his predecessor of provoking the Ukraine conflict. He said that the conflict was raging earlier this year and was headed into World War III, but that now you're not going to have that anymore. That's the nice part, Trump said, admitting that it remains to be seen how the conflict will be resolved. Since returning to office, Trump has taken a different approach. Well, it hasn't been different enough. I like to see it go more quickly. I think he needs to cut them off, as I have stated repeatedly. The only way that you're going to ensure that this war is over is cut them off, because Russia's not going to just retreat. That's not going to happen. And I can't imagine that there's going to be anything. So far this week, we got nothing. So last Friday, we had these cool meetings in Alaska. Monday, we had cool meetings with Z-Man and company with Trump. And then nothing. What else do we have? From the western side, we got, well, they're still going to be talking. From the eastern side, we got, well, maybe they're still going to be talking. From Ukraine, we got nothing. From Europe, we got, give us more, U.S., give us more. I'm wondering when this is going to be over. And so far, I'm not very encouraged. Not very encouraged at all. So, somebody help out here and tell us what we can expect and when this is going to be done. Because so far, I got nothing. Let's see if we can find somebody else who has a different point of view. Let's go to China, perhaps. Did you hear that the U.S. was putting a tariff on gold bars? Jeez, I don't even think I'm going to read that story to you. But Beijing is hitting back at the EU over, and it has blacklisted 2 banks operating in the EU. So, since the EU is targeting China now, Brussels had introduced its 18th package of measures against Moscow last month, if you remember. Focusing on energy and banking, it included restrictions against entities and financial institutions based in China, India, the UAE, and Turkey. And according to the statement released by the Chinese Ministry of Commerce on Wednesday, Beijing included Lithuania-based UAB Urbo and AB Mono, those are banks, in its countermeasure list, immediately banning Chinese organizations and individuals from transaction cooperation and other activities within them. You know what was really funny? Yesterday, while I was going through one of the sites, which was another kind of a fort, several hundred years old, had a big lake around it with a moat. It was pretty cool. Wandering around, there were a couple of Chinese guys speaking Chinese, and I started speaking to them in Russian, and they speak Russian. Come to find out, it's just like over here. It's just like in the United States, where half of your college students are from China, and they're being educated in Russia as well. And so they come over here and they're learning Russian, and they're going to technical schools, and then they go back to their own countries. And so there's the rest of the world is doing quite a bit about changing the focus on these. And so China has people coming everywhere. And we got to talking about sanctions as well with these guys. And they said that, the U.S. has started impacting some of the sanctions. And so a lot of the Chinese students are looking to go to other locations, including, clearly, Belarus. So I don't know whatever these sanctions are doing, but China is kicking back. In China, they've emphasized that the move taken by the authorities against Chinese banks are serious violations of international law. But the European Commission pledges to review the measures, but the bloc is open to identifying a mutually acceptable solution that could ultimately lead to the delisting of these banks. Well, that's going to mean quit trading in Russian oil. But with these banks being added to Chinese sanction lists, because now China and Russia are starting to use sanctions as well against other people. And it's starting to take effect. So Beijing has consistently refused to join the West's sanctions imposed on Moscow, and they still maintain their close economic ties with Russia and call for diplomatic resolution of the Ukraine conflict. And I think they're going to be successful in this. The EU, meanwhile, is still wanting to continue to maintain Russian sanctions. An earlier report claimed that Ukraine's European backers have been weighing a phased rollback of restriction of its ceasefires reached. The EU has reaffirmed its commitment to keeping sanctions heavy against Russia. And they're rejecting the media report that they could be eased sanctions in exchange for a ceasefire deal in Ukraine. The West has imposed this unprecedented number of sanctions on Moscow over the conflict, along with the 18th package and the 19th in the works. Sky News reported earlier this week that discussions had been held about easing these measures. European Commission Deputy Chief Spokesperson Ariana Podesta dismissed the report as pure speculations and told a press briefing on Thursday that the bloc is going to maintain pressure on Europe. She said work was underway on a 19th package. 19th package of sanctions. How do you like that? These people are geniuses. The Kremlin, meanwhile, has called the sanctions a double-edged sword and warns that each package adds a new negative effect for the countries that are joining. Moscow says it has developed an immunity to such sanctions, and I think they have, and they're doing it by what we discussed earlier in the show, trading more in the ruble. Meanwhile, people who don't know what in the world's going on, like Zelensky, Lindsey Graham, all want to focus on more sanctions, as if this is going to do something. I don't know. I'd be happy to discuss it with them or to learn more about why they believe these sanctions are going to be effective. I don't believe they are. I don't believe they are at all. Back to the war portions, there was a Ukrainian member of parliament who outlined that Ukraine has lost several generations. You know, we have the news earlier that these 1.7 million troops have died in Ukraine. And this MP admits that the loss of several generations in the 3-year conflict with Russia. And his name is Artyom Dmitriuk. And this came after the release of this more than 1.7 million troops info that came out, like I said earlier in the show, that these Russian hackers released on these enormous numbers of people that are died. But this Dmitriuk said the list of missing today contains more than 1 million people. And of course, these people are most likely dead while their families remain in complete ignorance. The situation is tragic and it's frightening. He warned that villages had been emptied of men including elderly and disabled, and that Ukraine is facing huge losses and a serious demographic crisis. We have lost several generations, he said, and he urges peace on the ground because both Ukrainians and Russians were dying. Reported figures far exceed official estimates. And like I told you before, old Z-Man says that only 46,000 have died since the start of the war. That is clearly not true. They lost 70,000 just in the Kursk debacle. So don't believe these numbers. Not at all. Not at all. Well, let's see if we can get to an opinion piece here. Security guarantees are still what we are talking about. Security guarantees. What this means is a euphemism for Western Europe funding America's military-industrial complex. Pretty good analysis, by the way. Can the EU manage to go even a single week without begging to be cut? Spoiler alert, nope. This time they even boarded a plane for transatlantic booty call. Security guarantees is what the Western European establishment keeps demanding for Ukraine, and it looks like Trump has found a way to monetize it at the EU's expense, a cost that will be passed on directly to European citizens. When the idea of a peace deal was floated earlier this year, UK and France tried to hype up the concept of putting 30,000 EU troops in Ukraine, but only if the peace broke out long enough to render the exercise glaringly useless and redundant. The plan depended on U.S. air cover babysitting them, but EU citizens are unmoved, and the elected officials who rely on them to remain in their cushy seats of power knew this. Apparently, a militarized and liberated Ukraine doesn't exactly sell well to the Europeans. Next, Western Europeans were carpet bombed with stereoscopic rhetoric about the necessity to blow a ton of cash on weapons so that Europe could maintain its own security and Ukraine's. Without even actually being in the EU, Ukraine is already being treated like the free perfume sample tossed into every shopping bag at Sephora, the one that makes your groceries reek whether you wanted them to or not. And because Ukraine has become the rhetorically inseparable, the Euro jokers in charge started invoking a future Russian invasion date for Europe of 2030. It's like the new form of hypochondria, except instead of reading about a disease online and convincing yourself that you have it, they start believing that Russia was invading them just from observing events in Ukraine. This 2030 invasion propaganda seems to have originated from NATO think tanks like the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, which last year stated that 2030 is the date of Russia's military reconstitution. The RAND Corporation has also warned of a revanchist Russia in a report on the future of warfare 2030 that will fight its own neighbors, Russia will. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte then parlayed all this info into a demand for European members coughing up 5% of their own GDP in defense spending, up from 2% previously demanded by Trump. Sorry, I'm having a bit of a stuffy nose problem here. The Euro clowns started trying to get buy-in through active audience participation, telling citizens to pack canned tuna and water into go bags in preparation for Putin's 2030 arrival. They even floated the idea of citizens investing in special financial products to fund European defense. If you forego one Starbucks visit per week, you can help buy a whole tank someday for somebody who really needs it. Scary times, huh? Better obey Daddy Trump via NATO and pledge 5% of GDP on weapons while the local struggle to crank out baguettes thanks to insane energy costs. Maybe we can all make life easier for the clowns trying to triangulate all this. It became clear a while ago that this whole security guarantee charade is a pretext for weapons. Europe has even ramped up weapons factory production, according to the Financial Times. After Trump met with EU leaders Rutte and Zelensky at the White House on Monday, he wrote online that during the meeting we discussed security guarantees for Ukraine, which guarantees would be provided by the various European countries with a coordination of the United States of America. Security guarantees have apparently now become a euphemism for Europe funding America's military-industrial complex. No doubt, the U.S. will be too busy with Ukrainian minerals to supply the weapons themselves, so they need NATO to buy them. In other words, maybe the security around those things, why doesn't the EU insist on just being a part of the minerals deal? Meanwhile, EU leaders continue brainwashing themselves with their own propaganda. Peace must be achieved through strength. We must have strong security guarantees to protect Ukraine and Europeans' vital security interests, said European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. If we are weak today with Russia, we will prepare for tomorrow's conflicts. Crazy. French President Emmanuel Macron said, no weakness. Basically, we're going to say is that we want peace, but we want a robust peace, he said. He wants peace that punches potentially future adversaries in the face preemptively. And Trump seems only too thrilled to indulge and profit off of this EU self-imposed psychosis. Hard to not agree, yes, because there's absolutely no realistic threat that Russia is going to attack NATO, that Russia is going to attack any European nation. That's just not going to happen. So, at any rate, I appreciate you all. I thank you all for being here. Please continue to listen to my show at Sunday through Thursday, 9 p.m. Chicago time, and always on the podcasts, which are recorded at internationalflavor.com. Join me again tomorrow night and have a good evening.